Okay, good. So welcome everybody to this presentation. Inventory management is definitely a big subject, especially this year with all of the craziness that's been going on in inventory with Amazon. So this presentation is called Surviving IPI Limitations During the Holidays. And I'm going to talk about the restrictions that Amazon has put on a lot of the inventory, what their behaviors have been, what we can potentially count on for the future, and how to better handle your inventory management to ensure that you stay in stock this holiday season. What are some of the things to do if you do run out of stock to be able to protect those limits and that type of thing? Because there are certain things that you should be doing and that you should know in terms of how Amazon's algorithm is handling restock limits and also max ship quantities. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that. And if you have any questions, you can post it in the Q&A section or you can post it in the chat. And I will get to most of those questions at the end. But if there's something that's relevant for what we're talking about, we will go ahead and get into that as well on the spot. All right. Okay, so just a little bit about me. My name is Chelsea Cohen. I am the co-founder of SoStocked.com, and I've been an Amazon seller since 2014. I started out in about 2017. I was kind of, getting into speaking, consulting, and that type of thing, mostly in terms of copywriting, and have worked with a lot of students, a lot of clients regarding their conversion rates, improving their conversion rates using just copywriting alone. I've been featured on AMPM podcast, Seller Stories with Jungle Scout. I spoke at the Amazing Summit, as well as some other notable speaking locations. And so that's kind of where I was at, about several years ago. And then in 2018, I really got sick of having problems with inventory, right? So I was dealing with, stockouts, dealing with overstocking, dealing with inventory being stranded and getting lost at Amazon until after the holidays. Our best seller basically was not in stock one year for Christmas at all, just because I had waited too long to ship my inventory and it had arrived a couple of days after the check-in day. So Amazon said they lost my inventory and then they miraculously found it after the Christmas season, which didn't help me much. So, all of these various things, over ordering products, ended up paying thousands in storage fees. The profit margin on that particular product, continued to decrease month after month every time I was charged new storage fees, loan interest, and that type of thing. Type in the chat if any of this is familiar to you, if any of this sounds about right. The other thing that I found I had trouble with was keeping up with the inventory management. It took a long time to analyze my data. And so sometimes I would put it off because it took so much time. I would have all these other things going on and I would put it off and then find that I was 2 weeks too late and I should have done it. I should have done the planning and the ordering a couple of weeks ago. So those are very, very common problems in terms of inventory management. So I discovered that I needed a new system. And so I started looking for systems. I couldn't find anything that worked. Either it didn't make sense or it was kind of cookie cutter. It didn't work for all of my products, worked for some of my products, various solutions, software solutions. And also I couldn't understand the recommendations. So I needed a solution and I knew how I wanted it to work, but I really needed to figure out who could help me to make it more streamlined, make it faster, make it more automated. So I met Dan Fernandez, and he's the co-founder of SoStocked.com. He is also the founder of Thomason.com. If anyone remembers Thomason from about 2015, a lot of Amazon sellers were using Thomason. It's an influencer brand connector. So before Amazon changed their review policies, people were using influencers to do video reviews on Amazon. So Thomason.com is something that I had used and had heard of. And he said he was bored. He needed a new software project. I needed a solution. So we teamed up and created SoStocked. So all that to say that we've just really been eating, sleeping, breathing Amazon inventory management now for over 2 years. We've tested a lot of the different inventory management platforms, seen what was wrong with them, what worked well, and essentially then built a platform, took on a few dozen 7- and 8-figure Amazon sellers, and then further streamlined our system. And we've really been just crowdsourcing information, understanding the best elements of inventory management, now I've talked to hundreds of Amazon sellers and really learned the ins and outs of how Amazon treats various different types of businesses, kind of more in-depth ideas of how their algorithms run, just based on the fact that I've talked to so many people. So we've been able to bake that into SoStocked. And whether you use SoStocked or not, what we're going to talk about are really the techniques to use, both just in terms of inventory management in general, and then also in terms of working with Amazon, based on best practices from the Amazon sellers that we have worked with. So you can use it in SoStocked, or you can take that data and use it with whatever system you are currently using, potentially. Just make sure that you understand how those other systems are actually calculating your data. So most definitely a lot of stuff is available or able to be practiced using spreadsheets. It just takes a lot longer. All right, so we're going to go ahead and talk about the IPI bomb that was dropped at the middle of this year. So Amazon basically made this decision that they were going to increase the threshold for the inventory performance index. Let me know if you don't know what the inventory performance index is. We are going to talk about that, but it would be good to kind of know how much, you guys know about the inventory performance index. That way I know how in depth I need to get in this talk. So you can go ahead and type something in the chat if you really want me to go more in depth on the IPI. Otherwise, we can go more quickly through it and get to some of the meat of the best practices. So yeah, so what they basically decided is that they were going to change the threshold from 400 to 500. So that means that if your score was 500 or lower, you were going to be penalized in that your space limitations and your storage limitations were going to be significantly lowered, right? So a lot of businesses were scrambling to improve their scores before that happened, and started seeing a significant change in the amount of inventory that they were allowed to send in. A lot of this is coming down the pike of having, a lot of things go online based on, due to coronavirus. So that's kind of one of the things that we're seeing as a result. I honestly don't think that it's going to get too much better after the holidays. But we need to see. But essentially, you need to get better at inventory management, because Amazon is sending a lot of signals to us that they want that to happen and that they don't want to be housing inventory that doesn't move. Okay, so essentially, starting on August 16th, that restriction went in place, and then it's supposed to be extending till the end of the year, and the restrictions are supposed to be lifting at the end of the year. We're going to find out if that is the case, or how much they will be restricted, or the restrictions will be lifted. Really, it's kind of, up in the air as to what exactly is going to happen after the end of the year. The issue that we're seeing is essentially people who had lower IPI scores were limited, but the thing that we're finding out is that all sellers are seeing limitations. So even if you had a score above 500, you are still most likely limited to the amount of stock that you can send into Amazon. And so it is a restriction that many sellers are seeing and having to contend with. All right, so what is an IPI score? So the IPI stands for the Inventory Performance Index, and it's essentially how Amazon calculates how good you are at maintaining an acceptable balance in your inventory levels, right? So there are two different numbers that you're going to get from Amazon. You're going to get the restock limit, right? We're calling it IPI limit. It's a restock limit, right? Because everybody has one. It's not necessarily, has something to do with your IPI, but everybody has a limit. So we'll also call it a restock limit, which is a more honest way of terming it. So we have a restock limit and we have a max ship quantity, right? And those are two different things. And I'm going to talk about exactly how Amazon calculates the max ship quantity, because that is extremely important in your inventory planning for this holiday season. So the IPI limit is the total amount of inventory that Amazon's going to let you send at any time to FBA, right? It includes a couple of things. You're going to have a per SKU limit based on the amount of inventory or the amount of sales that you made in the past, right? So they're going to look at, say, the last 30 days of sales, and they're going to allow you, potentially to sell 90 days, stock 90 days worth of inventory. Now, it's not always, precise, and that's being recalculated on a daily basis. But that is your per SKU limit. Then your account as a whole has a limit. It's called it's the global space limits. Overall, you have a certain allotment of space total. So if you have inventory that is very bulky and moves very slowly, that could, if you put too much of that in there, that could take up space and use up too much space so that your items that you're able to send in for, say, your best sellers maybe don't have enough space because they're being taken over by a slow moving product. So that's when you start to get into having to prioritize your best selling items and sending those to Amazon before you consider sending some of your slow movers to Amazon, or really limiting the amount of inventory from your slow moving products. All right, and then you have your max ship quantity. So max ship quantity is your limit minus the current FBA inventory that is in Amazon. So that's any FBA available stock, any reserve amount, right, minus any customer orders that are shipping out. So any reserve amount, and then also incoming FBA shipments. So that's really important to understand, and not a lot of people realize that. If you've got a limit of 2,000 and you have 500 units at Amazon right now, and then you place an order in China for another 1,500, you've just maxed out your stock. So you can't send anything else in until you sell more inventory. So even if it's going to take 30 days for your items to arrive at Amazon, because you created those stickers and because you told Amazon that you're sending that inventory in, you're no longer able to send any more. So I've seen sellers who have not realized this happening recently, had stickered items in China coming to FBA, and it actually blocked them from sending local inventory replenishment into FBA. So it really becomes important to plan correctly so that you don't block your local inventory by stickering your Chinese inventory, which takes a lot longer to arrive, right? As of now, hopefully all of your inventory has arrived, but that is something to know and to consider, right? Same thing with if you've got, if you can send in a couple of cartons as opposed to if you have to, send LTL, you might consider sending your cartons in first, because those are more likely to get checked in more quickly, because they can get into Amazon fulfillment centers more quickly. All right. Okay, and now let's talk about restock limits and max ship quantities in a little bit more actionably, and really just to know where can you find this data, right? This data is available on Amazon, and we actually pull this data into SoStocked directly on a daily basis. These limits are updated on a daily basis. So we pull this into SoStocked on a daily basis, but you can find this information on a daily basis as well. And your limits are accessible in a report called the Restock Inventory Report. So if you go to reports and then you go to fulfillment and find the restock inventory report, you can download that, and you'll have a restock limits column and you'll have a max ship quantity column, right? So the max ship quantity is the most you can send at any given time. And this is changing on a daily basis based on your sales. All right, now influencing factors. So the influencing factors as regards to your IPI score, there's actually 4 influencing factors, and then there's a kind of a secret influencing factor that was revealed in a survey that was done in one of the masterminds that I'm a part of that I'll also talk about. So you need to know how to improve your score especially if you're under 500, you need to know how to improve your score. But just in general, improving your score helps you to save money, to increase your profitability, and also to avoid lost sales due to stocking out. All right, so the factors that influence inventory health, and that is essentially what inventory performance, your inventory performance index is. It helps to see how healthy your inventory is, how good you are at managing your inventory. So those things are stranded inventory, excess inventory, sell-through, and in-stock inventory. So I'm going to talk about each one of these and what are the tactics that you can apply, and what are the practices you can adopt that will help you in better monitoring these. All right, so let's talk about what you do. So on your path to improving your inventory performance index, the fastest thing to tackle would be any stranded inventory, right? There are a couple of reasons why inventory can be stranded, but essentially stranded inventory just simply means that you've got inventory at the warehouse and the listing that it's attached to is not live. You've for some reason not been able to sell on that listing, right? Your listing has been deactivated, or your selling privileges for that particular SKU have been revoked, right? So sometimes that can happen because you've got an error in your listing. Maybe you're using a word that you don't necessarily aren't necessarily supposed to be using. And if you have an interest in finding out, my copywriting agency has a list of restricted terms. So if you're interested in getting a list of restricted terms, you can send me an email at stock@SoStocked.com. You can send me an email and I'll go ahead and get you hooked up with the restricted terms list. But restricted terms is one of the things that we're seeing a lot of products be delisted for, right? It's been kind of a massive sweep recently where listings have been suspended because of terms. There's been a big crackdown on this. So if your listing has been deactivated, that could be one of the reasons, right? Another reason would be, for example, if you're in wholesale, you start selling a product and then the brand owner decides they don't want you to sell that product anymore, and they report that, you could be delisted as well. So you can either relist your product by fixing the issues in your listing that are causing you to be suspended, or worst case scenario, you have to pull that inventory and remove it from Amazon, and that will handle your stranded inventory. Okay, so now there's excess inventory. So this is essentially just too much inventory, right? More inventory than you should have. So for example, if you sent in 1,000 units and you're only selling 30 units a month, that would be way too much inventory. So there's a couple of ways to handle this. One way to handle would be to create a removal order for overstock. There are usually fees attached to this. And I think it's about, for removal, it's 30 cents per unit. And for disposal, I think it's 15 cents. I haven't checked too recently, but I'm pretty sure it's 15 cents per unit, and they just destroy that inventory. So creating a removal order, removing that stock will help you it'll also help you with fees. It'll help you with your IPI limit, and it'll also help you, or your IPI score, and it will also help you with controlling those fees. So that's removal orders. Now, as a strategy, it could be said that, every now and then you do have a product that doesn't do as well as you think it's going to do. So about July or August, maybe even into September, Amazon starts pushing free removal orders. They waive the removal fees. They say, we're going to allow you to ship it back to yourself for free. We're not going to charge you anything. We just want you to get it out of there so that we can get ready for Christmas. And for as long as I've been selling on Amazon, they have been doing these free removals around that period of time. So it might be a good strategy if you do have a dead product that you've tried to sell through it, for the first part of the year, and it just isn't really working. You could remove at least a portion of that, calculate what you will sell for the next, say, couple of months, and then you can remove a portion of that. Amazon's not going to want you to send inventory back in after you have gotten your removal fees waived. So you need to be careful with that. But that's something that you could on an annual basis take advantage of. Right. And that's the removal fees are not waived anymore, but that is something that could be a strategy on an annual basis. All right, set up a 3PL and fulfillment center. So right now, Amazon's policies and all the things that they have been doing have really been pushing towards their desire to get us out of their warehouses and into our own warehouses. They are growing like crazy. I don't think that's something that's going to change necessarily. And they're sending up all sorts of signals, via their policies that they really want to be a distribution center. They don't want to be a storage facility. So what that means is they don't want to house inventory that is sitting there, parked, stagnant, not moving. They want to have inventory that is constantly turning over. So they don't like this excess inventory, which is why they have it as part of one of the factors in their inventory performance index. So the best way to start out is to set up a third-party warehouse, send your stuff to the warehouse, send a little bit to Amazon, and then replenish from that third-party warehouse. And that will keep your Amazon inventory performance index in better shape. It could potentially keep your storage fees down as well. All right, so good data is the important key. So it's very important to know that you're getting the right data. So this is something that we talk about a lot with SoStocked. The right data has to do with something called an adjusted sales velocity. So adjusted sales velocity means that we're not just looking at the total number of sales within a time period. So if I were planning for the holiday season, I might look back and I might see, that I sold 10,000 units of a product. But what I might have forgotten is that there was one day when my product was mentioned on a news station and we had a huge sale, had a huge spike, and that's not going to happen next year. So I need to actually eliminate that. And so one of the things you need to do is have what's called an adjusted sales velocity. And adjusted sales velocity works like this. So if you have an inventory forecast, you can look at your velocity, right? Say you want to look at your 30, 60, 90 days, or you want to look at your last year's sales, all of the days, every day of last year, what did I do in sales for that time period? Well, maybe there was a huge spike and you would need to factor that out. Maybe you stocked out, you would need to factor that out. So you need to build as part of your system the ability to remove sales spikes and remove stockouts, such as this, right? Being able to see, did you have inventory? Did you not have inventory? Was your listing suspended? Those types of things need to be tracked. So if you're using a spreadsheet, you need to track these on a spreadsheet. And when you're doing your calculations, you're removing them so that you're not just looking at the total sales for the time period and making your decisions based on that. You're looking at the true data, total sales for the time period, plus I stocked out for 10 days. So how much would I have sold at the same rate? Add that. Plus we had a mention on, say we had a mention on a news station and we had this huge spike. Let's remove that as well. And then we actually get the real adjusted velocity so we can see truly what the sales were for that particular product for that particular time. All right, I cannot emphasize enough why this is very important, especially when you're doing projections for a holiday season, because that was a year ago. It takes us a lot, it's a lot harder to remember what happened a year ago if we're not tracking it than it is to remember what happened 30 days ago. All right. Okay, now I want to talk about min-max restocking. So this is one of those things that can be applied so that you are really getting systemized with your business. It's a system for really kind of codifying your orders and your transfers. It essentially works like this. You have a minimum, which you should always have. We call it a buffer stock or a safety stock. And that's a minimum that you set for a couple of reasons. Usually you think you set a buffer stock just so that if anything goes wrong, you have a little bit extra, right? So I'm going to say, let's have 10 days of extra stock. There might be, a little bit of a cushion so that if anything goes wrong, I still have 10 days worth of stock at Amazon in order to ensure that I still stay in stock, even if, my shipment is a couple of days late. That's fine, but actually it should be a larger buffer stock than that. And the reason is that Amazon tends to penalize products. Their algorithm tends to favor products that have enough stock, and they don't like to promote products that have too little stock. For example, there have been sellers that have seen they have a 1-day Prime badge for their products, and that 1-day Prime badge goes away if they have too little stock. So for one of the sellers that I was talking to, this is something that he witnessed, and he would always keep his stock at least 30 days worth of stock, right? 30 days worth of stock. That way there's enough distribution throughout the entire country, because Amazon has to get that, they have to hit that 2-day Prime goal. So if you don't have any inventory, say in the Midwest, and someone searches for your product in the Midwest, they're not going to necessarily give your ad, for example, your ad for that keyword, they're not going to award you that ad. They're going to award your competitor that ad because your competitor has a ton of inventory in the Midwest and they know they can hit that 2-day Prime. Similarly, you might come down the rankings temporarily because you don't have stock in that area. There's ranking, but then you have ranking by, geolocation, just based on, can they actually get that inventory into Amazon? So those are some things that are, that could be happening behind the scenes with the Amazon algorithm, that if you have too little inventory on hand, you could be penalized. It might be something very subtle, but it's something to kind of keep in mind in considering your buffer stock. So you would set your buffer stock minimum, and then you in min-max restocking would set a maximum. And the maximum is to control so that you don't have too much inventory, so that your IPI score is good, and so that your fees stay as low as possible. It's also a way to be able to pass this task over to a VA without it being too complicated. It's kind of like a paint by numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and show you exactly how a min-max restocking would work. And again, this is something that you can also do on a spreadsheet potentially. Okay. So if you were to do min-max restocking, you would have two choices. You could either say, I want a certain number of units, or you could say you want a certain number of days worth of stock. I prefer days because days will allow you to always have a set amount without having to come in and mess with this. So if you have a low period and a high period, if you put 30 days, that amount is going to fluctuate based on your sales velocity for the period. So if we use our scenario of 30 days and 90 days, we know that our inventory is going to essentially stay in stock for, we're going to be told to send in 90 days worth of stock. We're going to sell through that 90 days, get down to 30 days and have our inventory arrive so that by the time we hit 30 days, our inventory is arriving and we're going back up to 90, right? So you always want to make sure when you're setting this up, like we have in the SoStocked system, when you're setting this up, if your inventory takes 15 days to arrive, then you should be shipping it out 45 days before you hit 0, because you have 30 days of buffer stock, 15 days of transfer time. You need to make sure that you account for both of those. So that would be how we would set up a min-max restock. And this is something that a lot of big warehouses use. I went to a warehouse that manufactured a lot of print-on-demand books. and they had a weight system, a scale system, and they had weights for all of their paper products and all of their ink. And they would set min-max system for their paper and their ink based on that weighted system. The last thing is we have IPI limits. So you know, for some products you want to ship in inventory so that you hit your max ship quantity. Because if you're having trouble staying in stock and it takes a long time for Amazon to check this stuff in, shipping as much as possible makes a lot of sense, right? For some of those products that you're having trouble with. So we, you know, set up an override so that you're able to then override any of your current settings and ship in only what Amazon will allow you to send, and sending in the total amount that they'll let you send. All right. All right, then there's sell-through. Right, so sell-through rate. So that is how quickly are you selling through your inventory, right? You send inventory in, and you know, does the entire shipment sell through in a month? Does it sell through in 2 months? Does it sell through in 6 months? Right? Your sell-through rate has to do with how long it takes that order to finish selling through, right? How long does it take your 1,000-unit order to sell out completely? And your sell-through rate should be fairly rapid. You don't want to have 6 months worth of inventory, you know, sitting there not selling. So to improve your sell-through rate, essentially you need to increase your sales. That's one tactic, right? Increasing your sales through traffic and conversion rate improvements. So these could be things like, you know, improving your listing, you know, doing better copy, better images, more keywords, more PPC, right? I do recommend making sure that your listing conversion is very good before jumping into PPC so that you get the most out of your sponsored ads. And then running sales, right? Any sales that you could run potentially. And there is another reason why running sales can actually help you with your restock limits as well. And I'll talk about that in a second. And then, so as part of inventory planning, one of your strategies should be to work on increasing the sell-through rate of your slow-moving products. So you should actually have a report for that. There's a report that you can create where, you know, you actually are judging based on a couple of different things. You have adjusted velocity. So you should know what your adjusted velocity is, and then how many days of inventory is on Amazon. So you should actually potentially make a report that is based on your adjusted velocity. So say, for example, you have anything that sells less than 2 units a day, for example. Well, maybe you want to take those products and sell out of them, right? You want to make sure that you stock out of those particular products. So you should have a report that is potentially a liquidation report. It could be, you know, 5 units a day, it could be 2 units a day, it could be, you know, 10 units a day. And those are items that you have to decide, either I'm going to liquidate and sell out of this, or I'm going to figure out how to make it sell faster. So that would be a potential liquidation report. The other report that you might want to make is, you know, essentially just an overstock report, right? So that would be how many days left on Amazon. And these are just various ways of looking at your inventory, right? So if you had any products that had over 90 days worth of inventory, right? How many days worth of inventory do you have? Then you could create that list and realize that you're overstocked on some of these items and start running some sales, or realizing that you can, you know, based on your profit margin, you might be able to price them more competitively and move a bunch of inventory and get it to be ranking a lot higher, and then gradually bring up the price. I talked to a seller who actually he didn't plan on making a profit until about, you know, 5,000 to 7,000 units were sold, and then he would start making a profit. So, you know, there's something to be said with every month that you have your inventory in there, you could potentially be losing profit. So it might make sense to be a little bit more competitive with these and move them. If you have, like, you know, 200 days worth of stock, you're going to either lose it by, you know, paying extra storage fees, or you're going to lose some profit by paying extra, PPC or lowering your cost. So the second option could potentially position your product a lot higher in the search ranking and make it successful. So it makes a lot more sense to be aggressive some of the time and lose a little bit of profit by being aggressive than losing profit by, kind of sitting on it and hoping it eventually sells. All right. Okay, now increasing your sell-through through increasing your sell-through increases your IPI limits. Okay, so this is important. So recently we had some Prime Day sales. The thing that was good about this was that if your product did well on Prime Day, then your sales increased and therefore your IPI limits increased. So if you're having trouble getting your product's restock limits to be high enough, it might make sense to increase or ramp up doing sales to try to get that, those restock limits to be a little bit higher, right? Now, that could be a double-edged sword if you end up running out of stock, but I'll talk about one of the things you can do if you do end up running out of stock at Amazon. So increasing your sales and increasing your velocity, you'll see a pretty quick increase in those restock limits, right? It's not going to be that you have to wait 30 days to see it. It'll be instant. So the restock limits are changing on a daily basis. So you should be able to, as your sales are increasing, you should be able to see that limit is increasing. So it's a good idea to check your restock limit over time and send more stock in more often, because even though your restock limit last week might have been 2,000, this week it might be 2,500. And then of course, stop sending in too much inventory, right? So we've talked about doing min-max restocking, and we talked about having a third-party warehouse. Stop sending too much inventory on as part of your general practice, and you will help to kind of clean up some of your IPI issues. All right. Okay, so we talked about velocities and sales spikes. Warehousing. So you should have your third-party warehouse, and you also need to track your third-party warehousing. So whatever system you're using, some of the softwares out there don't track warehousing. And I think they're going to be a little bit behind the 8 ball, and they're probably going to start to aggressively try to incorporate that into their system. But that was one of the things that we noticed with some of these other tools, is that they didn't have warehousing tracking. So that becomes extremely important, because you should actually be doing more than one forecast. Every single SKU has multiple different forecasts running at the same time. So you have an order forecast, right? Based on your inventory, how much do you have to order? What's your order? When do you have to order it? And how much do you have to order, right? But if you have warehouse inventory, you also need to track your warehouse inventory. Let's see if we have any transfers. So this product has warehouse inventory. So instead of saying to place an order with our supplier, we're going to transfer inventory instead, because we have a ton of inventory sitting here. So we're going to have a transfer. So not only should you have an order forecast, you should also have a transfer forecast. And beyond your order and transfer forecast, you should actually have a third forecast potentially. So if you can air ship something, you should also have an express transfer or an express shipment forecast, right? Not sure if we have any right now. Let's see. We don't have any right now, but for example, if we had an express lead time, we might be able to predict that we needed to send an order by express, right? So you should have potentially 3 different forecasts happening at once. And then of course, min-max transfers. So min-max restocking, min-max transfers would work the same way. in-stock inventory. So Amazon wants to know how often you've been in stock. Now, they have put together on their website this in-stock rate calculation. And so what they're looking at is they're looking at every single SKU, how much has it been in stock in the past 30 days, right? And then they're adding that all together and they're getting an overall average of in-stock rate. So if you have 50% in stock for one product and you have had 100% in stock for another product, with this calculation, they've actually calculated that those two products together are 80%. So some people have tried to delete certain SKUs. You have to be careful with that. Sometimes it can help. For example, if we deleted this 50% SKU, then we would be at 100% restock rate. But if we deleted the 100% instead of 80% restock rate, we would be at 50%. So you just have to be careful. This is something to know. This is something that Amazon says. However, this is not in actuality how they calculate restocking. They don't look at your in-stock days when they're telling you how much inventory you can send into Amazon, unfortunately. So quantity limits. So there's a couple of things that are happening. So if you have not sold a product or you have no sales history or very little sales history, the lowest limit you'll ever see is 200. You'll have 200 units. So if you have a product that sells one a day or one every other day, you'll still have a 200 unit limit. So if you're just launching a product, you'll have that 200 unit limit. You can ramp that up pretty quickly. And, like we said, you can see an increase based on velocity. You can see an increase, in every day that you're selling, you may be able to see an increase in that. Unfortunately, Amazon, they also factor space limits. So there was a survey done of 82 different sellers, and the common denominator was they had oversized products. So if you have oversized products, your space limits may have a big factor on why you're not able to send enough inventory in. You may look and see, I can only send 15 days worth of inventory in. Well, that might be because you've got an oversized item and you've got just a ton of, or you have just like a very limited amount of space, right? So that's a difficult thing to get around. Now, when Amazon is calculating what your sales are, essentially what they're doing is they're looking at your sales, how much did you sell in the last, say, 30 days? And then we're going to let you stock 90 days worth of inventory, potentially. If you stocked out 10 of those 30 days, they're not going to take an adjusted velocity, right? We talked about adjusted velocity is taking the stock out and estimating what you would have sold if you hadn't stocked out. They're not doing that. So if you stocked out for 10 of the 30 days, you're only going to be allowed to send in based on what you sold, not based on what you should have sold. So that's where stocking out becomes extremely detrimental to a business, right? So, but I'm going to talk about, one of the things that you can do if you do stock out at FBA. What can you do to prevent your restock limits from diminishing, because it can create a stock out cycle where you have less and less and less inventory that you're able to send in. All right, so remember real quick that the FBA shipments count as your FBA stock, right? We talked about if you're going to send inventory from China, you might want to send it to a third-party warehouse so you don't block your local warehouse inventory from being shipped into Amazon. If that does happen, see if you can potentially swap out the labels, divert your inventory to your third-party warehouse, and send your local inventory in its place using those current labels. Just print some new labels from Amazon and then swap the China labels out when they get to your warehouse. All right, so real quick, I want to talk about, so don't stock out. Stocking out is kind of one of the biggest issues that you'll have. If you do stock out, though, there is something that you can do. So if you do have a third-party warehouse and you have a fulfillment center, you can fulfill inventory on your own. and that is not going to affect your restock. So if you are continuing to sell to your customers using FBM, Amazon is going to continue to keep your restock levels at that rate. So if you do stock out at Amazon, you're waiting for inventory to arrive, you should have a system where you are actually fulfilling by FBM. So some people have wondered, should I fulfill by FBM or should I just wait? You should definitely fulfill by FBM if there's any way possible. And so I can give you a list of warehouses and fulfillment centers if you don't have that set up. It's getting to be a little bit late, right? We're in, I think, the third day of December. But if you are worried about stocking out and you really wanted to send an emergency shipment to a fulfillment center, that would be a good idea, right? Don't, putting all your eggs in one basket and having Amazon, delay their check-in times, delay their, receiving times, or just quote unquote lose your stock. That if that's your entire business and you have no backup plan, that can really be a Christmas killer. Ask me how I know. I actually had that issue my second Christmas selling. So preventing stocking out, part of that has to do with not letting Amazon be the only controller of your distribution, right? Because Amazon really, they essentially, they sucker punched a whole lot of us by putting restrictions in place that caused us to stock out, and then creating guidelines on, lowering our inventory performance index based on those stock outs. So it was kind of, a bum deal, but that's what happened. So we're kind of dealing with it. So we talked about, velocities. Make sure you have your velocity correct. Make sure you're factoring out stock outs and sales spikes. Have a buffer stock that is significant enough to make sure that Amazon is favoring your product, right, over your competitors, or at least as much as your competitors. Marketing sync. Make sure any marketing plans that you have, you want to make sure that you put these marketing plans into your inventory plans. I've seen a lot of people stock out just because they didn't have any for example, they were running lightning deals and they didn't figure out if they actually had enough inventory to for the lightning deal to actually take place, right? I've heard people cancel lightning deals because they didn't have enough inventory. So they set up a lightning deal, then they had to cancel it. Sales spikes. If you know that your sales are going to increase at a certain time, you need to actually, add that into your calculation when you're doing your orders. If you know that you're going to have, if you have an email, I had someone who did a 20% off coupon for Mother's Day, and then by Father's Day was stocking out. So it's really important to actually vet your marketing plans against your inventory plans. And that's a big reason why a lot of people run out of stock, is it's because they don't put their marketing into their inventory and they are constantly stocking out. It's actually something when I talk to inventory managers, they tend to laugh a little bit about that, and because it's a constant thing that they're dealing with. It's, you guys everyone should be a team. Marketing and inventory should be a team, along with the person who handles the cash flow, which would be your accountant, or maybe yourself as a small business owner. All of that should work cohesively as a team. Marketing, inventory, cash flow, back around to marketing, and then it closes the loop. But we need to make sure that we're adding all of these marketing plans in. So you need to ask, marketing to tell you what their plans are, and you can tell them whether they can do them or not, because you know how much inventory you have. All right. So we're getting to the end of this. Okay, so the last thing is to have a backup plan. Don't let Amazon be your only distribution channel. So even if it's your only sales channel, you only sell on Amazon, you shouldn't have it be where the only way to get your items to your customers is through Amazon. You should have a backup plan. So for me, I have a warehouse. All my stuff is being warehoused. I don't intend to stock out, right? I'm set up not to stock out, based on the calculations, based on my restock limits, and based on the system that I have in place, with SoStocked and with what I know. But I do have a backup plan. Amazon is not my only distribution channel. My current warehouse inventory for replenishment is sitting on one side of my vendor's warehouse, right? On the other side is a fulfillment center. So all that has to be done is for me to call up, my warehouse and say, okay, I need to start sending FBM. I need to start having you ship out FBM, and then they'll take some of my inventory and they'll put it to the fulfillment side and they'll start fulfilling my inventory. So having a backup plan is extremely important. I have another training where I talk about how to pick a good third-party fulfillment center. I have my fulfillment center that I'm happy to share with you. This is someone that I vetted specifically to see if they could handle it, because some people can't handle both a fulfillment center and a replenishment warehouse. So making sure that they can fulfill both is extremely important, but I can send that list to you afterwards. Staying on this call, I will send that out in the follow-up email when I send the replay. But it's extremely important just to have at least a backup. Even if you don't have inventory there, you should have someone that you know that you can send inventory to. So say a week from now, you see that you're gonna run out of stock, you can pick up the phone and know that that person has capacity, right? Do they have the capacity to take on new customers, new clients? Some, actually a lot of warehouses don't right now because of how crazy things have gotten. So have a backup plan, create, have your own distribution channel, make sure you can fulfill your inventory, especially based on all of the crazy sudden changes to Amazon's policies. Just having that is just a little bit of extra protection. All right, so when you're looking for an inventory management solution, you should look at something, you should make sure you're removing sales spikes, you're removing stockouts, you're factoring in lightning deals, you're projecting any seasonality that might be occurring, you're tracking all of your orders. We didn't even talk about order tracking. We do have an order tracking system. You're tracking all your orders, you're getting your reorder alerts so that you know to place a new order. And then you're managing your FBA inventory, your warehouse inventory, and anything that is currently in production or say, being shipped in. All of that you should know where all of that is, right? So you should have some sort of system to track where all of that is. And I'll just show you real quick. We have this little Kanban view. You can see all of your items, everything that's in production en route, where it's coming from, how it's being shipped, where it's going. And so you should have a way to visually see all of this in a couple of different ways. And then lastly, you should be able to, know what to order and when. All right, so we do have a question. Let's see. Any questions that you have, go ahead and let me stop the share for a second. Okay, quick question. If you have one warehouse and that you use as a 3PL that supplies both US and Canada FBA, are you able to keep track of both accurately as both pull from the same inventory stock? Yes. So I'm assuming you mean in the SoStocked system. So what would be done is if you're pulling inventory from the same place, you have the ability to track that. And the way that you would track that is you can tell the system which territories that particular warehouse serves. So if I were to jump into the warehouse, in the vendor section, let's do this warehouse here. Down here, we have warehouse marketplaces. So for this example, this warehouse actually does FBM sales and it doesn't send any inventory into the warehouse. So if you have a fulfillment center, it might be set up to not service any of the marketplaces. But if you wanted it to service both Canada and the US, you would click it on like that. If you had a separate Canada warehouse, you would just have it listed like that. So there is, you do have the capability of saying which marketplaces are serviced by which warehouse. If this account had, the UK, all of the UK territories would show up here, and then we would turn off all the US and just turn on all the UK or the UK and the EU warehouses. All right. I think that is the end of the question. Okay, good. So we answered that. Any other questions that anyone might have, you can go ahead and type them into the chat. The last thing that I will say is, I know some of you, looks like some of you have SoStocked, and so currently, SoStocked is forecasting, it does order tracking, PO creation and inventory management in general. Now, we're going to be getting into cash flow. We're going to be getting into integrating with Shopify and Walmart and those types of things. We're going to be getting into logistics, so you can see logistically what are the best decisions to make. Should you send everything, in a full container and pay the extra storage for any excess inventory? Should you send, partial containers? Figuring out, logistically what makes the most sense for your bottom line. Those are the types of things that we're planning on doing into 2021, is building in cash flow and logistics and more integrations. But right now we're in what we call our advanced beta. We have a couple of people who have written into us. They've been using the software for over a year now. So Colette was actually using Excel spreadsheets, and it was taking a lot of her time. She was making errors, which sometimes, created costly mistakes. And so she's been using SoStocked, and it's really helped her to streamline her system. Here's another seller who has real-time visibility now. He's minimized stockouts. He uses it to forecast demand and to do more cash flow management. He no longer has expensive air shipments, so he saved a bunch of money on that, and also has been able to, his score, his IPI score is in the high 700s, which he attributes to working with using SoStocked. And then this was someone who used this tool. He says there's many good things to say about this tool. He used it to be able to create a system before he sold his business. So creating streamlined systems can increase the valuation of your company. That's something that he knew, and so he wanted to put that in place before exiting the company, to show that there was increased value because there were systems in place. And an investor will pay a lot more for businesses that are kind of more turnkey. And so SoStocked was a way for him to get his inventory management to be more turnkey. All right, so right now we're doing our SoStocked.com for $59 a month for life. It's the lowest it's going to be. We're talking right now about raising the price in the next couple of weeks. We're going to raise the price, but we're doing like kind of a final push. For the last couple of weeks, we're going to be offering it at $59 a month. And so my partners are really pushing to raise the price, probably middle of this month. So if you're interested in SoStocked and you want to give it a try, sign up for the software now. It's the best time to sign up for it. I do personal one-on-one consulting call. So I help, you have a whole step-by-step guide to get you set up with it. And then I'll jump on, I'll look and see if your system is set up properly and give you tips and pointers based on your exact business needs and challenges, and what are the things that you can do and what can you put in place to avoid any of the issues that you're having in terms of inventory, whether it be, your IPI score, your any stockouts, any over ordering, anything like that. I can help to kind of advise on that as well. That's for that $59 a month. Other than that, you can reach out to me at stock@sostocked.com. I'm going to send this replay out as a in a follow-up email. I'll also include the list of warehouses. And if you're interested in getting the restricted terms list from me as well, reply to that email, let me know, and I can send that to you. We have our webinars every 2 weeks at sostocked.com/inventory-secrets. Other than that, if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and ask your final questions. Other than that, we could go ahead and jump off and have an awesome rest of your sales season. Hopefully it's going fantastic for you, and hopefully you can stay in stock and make as much money as possible. All righty, let's see, just one last call for any final questions. Okay, it looks like we're good. Hopefully it wasn't, too much data. Again, the replay will help. Sometimes it feels like it's drinking from a fire hose, but you can also check out our blog. Our blog has a lot of kind of step-by-step here, some of the best practices and, how to think with inventory management. We've been doing a lot of a lot of content through our blog, and that's blog.sostocked.com. All right, guys, have a fantastic rest of your week. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye. Thank you. Thanks.